Hello and welcome to the Green Profit Academy Pros Podcast. This show digs into the challenges in growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit. I'm Christeen Era.
And I'm Steve Bousquet. We are the green industry experts in profit, growth, and leadership.
So in today's episode, we're going to be exploring maximizing the sales price of your business, which is a crucial topic for any business owner who's considering to sell their company. And I'm very thrilled to have a very special guest on today, Jim Parker, and he's widely known as the Lawn Boss. So Jim is a seasoned expert in the lawn care industry. He has a wealth of experience in buying and selling businesses, and his hands-on expertise and strategic acumen that he's going to be sharing here today has helped countless entrepreneurs maximize the value of their ventures and also achieve successful sales in their company. So Jim, I want to welcome you today, and I appreciate that you're on our podcast and giving us some time to share your knowledge.
Oh, Christine, I'm so honored to be on your podcast. Thank you so much for having me.
So I want to start off so everybody kind of understands a little bit more about your background. Could you share with us how you ended up here with, being an expert in selling a company, and just kind of share your journey and how you became the Lawn Boss?
Well, I've been selling general businesses for nearly 25 years, and I always sold the trade type businesses. That's just a sector that I just fell in love with. I just felt most comfortable with those types of businesses, and those are the ones I found the most success with. And over the years, I just gravitated more and more to the lawn and landscape space. And so I chose that to be a vertical that I specialize in helping lawn and landscape owners actually sell those type of businesses. And I just love it. I love the space.
And how long has it been that you've been working in the industry of bringing a company to market?
Almost about 25 years now. I started at the end of 2001. And so, we're going on almost 25 years.
And I want to kind of talk about this because it was something that piqued my interest when we first started talking. And there's a difference between just selling your business, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's bringing your business to market. Could you help our listeners understand what the difference is between just doing a sell of a company and then bringing it to market?
Yeah, that's a great question, Christine. One of the things in my career, is I've seen everything. I've been involved with a bunch of different associations in my industry, and I've interacted with a lot of different business brokers. And like any industry, you've got great business brokers or M&A advisors, and you got good ones and you've got bad ones. And, unfortunately, a lot of times when a business owner wants to sell and they're approaching a business broker that maybe hasn't honed their skills, they're just taking the business, they're just trying to sell the business, and they're taking it and they're putting it out there for sale, and they're not really thinking about the things that are going to maximize the seller's sales price, get the seller the best terms possible, and actually sell the business at the end of the day. Christine, like the national average, it is estimated that only 10 to 20% of businesses for sale actually sell. And it's unfortunate because a lot of the larger business broker companies, they have this thought process of, they tell their agents, and it's not just the bigger companies, independents do it too, but it's this thought process of, just list anything you possibly can, take it to the market, see what sells, play the numbers game. You never know what's going to sell. And, every month that the business is not getting activity, go back to the seller and say, drop your price, drop your price, drop your price. And you keep doing that until the business actually sells. And to me, it's just not the way, that I would want to work. To me, it's about, when you engage, for me at least, when I engage with a business owner that's looking to sell, it is usually one of the biggest financial endeavors that they're doing in their life. This is going to be the biggest windfall of money that they're ever going to see. And so it's very, very important to them. And at the same time, it's their baby. They gave birth to it. They may have owned it for 20, 30, 40 years. They raised it. They sacrificed a lot in the beginning. They put a lot of energy and time to grow that business. And now they're selling it. And this is going to make up a large part of their retirement. And it's not even just that. It's that, it is a process that it's a relationship that I end up having with the seller during the sales process that could take 6 months. So you end up building a really good relationship with that seller during that time period that lasts many years. For a lot of the business owners that I've sold businesses for, I'm still in contact and friends with some of these owners that sold their business 15, 20 years ago. And, that's what you need to have in this industry. It's not just about, let's just throw this business out there, hope that it's going to sell, hope that we're going to get an okay price. If it doesn't, we're going to worry about company B or company C. We're going to list X amount of businesses. We're going to sell 20% of them. To me, it's about making sure you're picking the right businesses with the right owners. They're realistic on their asking price. Roll up the sleeves, be as aggressive as you possibly can in the marketing. And even before you take the business to the market, is it even time to take it to the market? One of the things I like to do is I like to have what I call an assessment call with the seller, where I'm kind of trying to get an overview of what their business is and how the buyers are going to look at it, the pros and the cons. And if there's certain things that we need to adjust before we go to the market, we need to make those adjustments before we go to the market. Earlier this year, I had a business owner that I spoke to. Actually, I'm sorry. Last year, I had a business owner that I spoke to, and it was actually the wife of the owner. And she called up and she's like, Jim, I got your name from so-and-so. And, I heard I want to go with you. And, we want to sell as soon as possible because we want to retire. And I said, okay, great. Let me do a broker's opinion of value, tell you what the most probable selling price of your business is. And so she sent over the financials and, we talked about the financials. And I did the broker's opinion of value. And they were like, her and her husband really wanted to retire. And I came back and I said, look, do you think your numbers this year are going to be the same or better than last year? And she said, I think that they're going to be better. And I said, well, if you wait another year, you're going to get about 30% more for your company than if you sell right now. And she goes, well, what would you do? And I'm like, well, I can't make that decision. All I can give you is the information. It's a time versus money situation. If you just want to retire and move on, maybe that's the most important thing to you. Or this is a lot of extra money that's going to help you in your retirement. And that's a decision that you guys are going to need to make. And they ended up holding off, and we took the business to the market this year and we sold it. And they got over 30% more than they would have last year. And that's the kind of conversations that you need to have. And whether, your listeners are talking to me or another business intermediary, you got to make sure you're talking to the right person that is not just thinking about themselves and what commission they may get, but who's working in the best interest of you as the business owner to maximize your sales price, get the best terms possible, and get the right buyer that's going to take over your baby and continue with that legacy that you started and the culture that you have with your employees, the culture that's with your suppliers and your customers. And, so to me, that's the difference.
And one of the things I heard you say in this that I was, as I was listening to you, that I was gathering here was that there's value in planning ahead when you're looking at selling your company. And one of the value points that you touched on was, is it the right time to sell? So being aware of, when is the right time? What does that look like? But what are some of the other things that if someone's looking at like, I want to sell my business, that they want to look at besides like, hey, you're going to have a higher revenue this next year. Mm-hmm. Let's hold off. What are some of those other things that a business owner should look at in preparing or planning ahead when they're thinking about, hey, I might want to sell my company?
Yeah, Christine, that's an excellent question, because that's part of what I do when doing an assessment call. And one of the biggest pieces of advice that I can give to your listeners if they're thinking about selling, because this is probably the one thing that I see the most with people that own lawn and landscape businesses or any businesses out there, but we're talking about lawn and landscape, so specialize in. They tend to run a lot of personal expenses through the business. They're trying to reduce their tax liability, so they're running all these personal expenses through the business, and it's very common. I'm not here to judge what they're doing from an ethics standpoint, but when they go to sell their business, it can make it a lot more difficult to sell the business, because some of the things they might be doing, buyers might not buy into. Other things the buyers might buy into, but the lenders are not going to buy into it. And that's probably the number one thing that could prevent a business from selling, or prevent the business from selling at the maximum sales price, because you're not going to recoup all the money that you could. So let me give you an example. Like, for every dollar that you're trying to save on taxes, even if you're in the highest tax bracket possible, you're saving 37 cents on that dollar by writing off a personal expense. But when you go to sell your business, you might be losing out on $3, $4, $6. I mean, it depends on the industry type within the lawn and landscape business and the size of your business. But the point is that you're trying to save cents and you're losing out on dollars. And if you're thinking about selling in the next couple of years, if a lender is going to be involved, they typically want at least 2 full tax years where the business will cash flow. So, if you're looking to sell 2 or 3 years out, you should start cleaning up your financials right now. And you know what? You should be cleaning up your financials anyways. It's going to allow you to analyze your financials better, and you run your business better because your financials are going to be more accurate. But then there's other things.
You're sharing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, you're sharing some really great strategies on how someone can prepare to sell their business. And so I just want to kind of recap some of those and look at other opportunities. And because not everybody, and I find this, not everybody thinks strategically, right? Like we're thinking strategically. You and I could have strategic conversations for days and go over all these really great strategies. But for some entrepreneurs and business owners, it's not, where they really thrive is in that strategic mindset. So some of the things that I'm hearing you say is the strategy is like, be aware of your revenue potential from not just your prior years, but what's coming in the next year or two. Be mindful of, what you're trying to save in the business when it comes to that tax liability and obligation, because you could be, saving 37 cents on the dollar, but on the other side, you could be gaining, $3 on the dollar of the value of your business.
Yeah.
So much more. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what are some of and then the other thing I heard you say, which, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, go ahead. Go ahead, Christine.
The other thing that I heard you say that I absolutely love is keeping your financials in order, right? So making sure your financials in order, so it truly reflects the potential that your company has on the number side.
Absolutely. When buyers are looking at a business, the number one thing they're going to be looking at the end of the day is, how much revenue is the business making and how much is it making bottom line? That's everything. Before they go any further to know, how many clients you have and what client concentration, the density of your routes or anything like that, your equipment, the condition of the equipment, how long you've been in business. The first thing they're looking at is how much is it doing gross sales? How much is it making bottom line? What's the asking price? If it's, if we have an asking price attached to it. And so those financials are critical. That's the first thing they're going to look at. They're going to spend 10 seconds looking at that. And if it doesn't make sense to them, they're moving on and they're not even looking any further.
Wow. Yeah, that does have a huge impact, I think, on the value of a business and being able to see like how profitable is this company and does it make sense? Is there any other strategies?
There is. And before we go on, I don't want to scare the listeners, but one of the other things too is not just, how much you're doing gross and how much you're doing bottom line. And we do things like add backs, and probably don't want to get into this right now, but they also need to realize that when a buyer does put an offer in and it's executed, the buyer's going to have the opportunity to do their due diligence to see if the numbers that are presented are accurate. And if it's a large enough company, they might do what's called a quality of earnings report, which is, they dig really, really deep. So it's very, very important that not only are your financials reflecting, what you're doing, but your financials are organized. It's easy for the buyer to do their due diligence. The information is all there. And Christine, this is why I like, when somebody's working with somebody like you and your company, because then then I'm like, oh, Christine, this is great because her company, we're going to get through this due diligence. So we're going to get through this quality of earnings and it's going to be easy. And that's what I love about it, Christine. So, but you were asking about other things, and probably another big thing in the space is that once in a while I talk to a business owner and they have high client concentration. They have that one client that makes up 30, 40% or more of their revenue. And that really scares the buyers away, obviously, because the buyer looks at it and goes, okay, yeah, I acquire your business. And then, but if I lose that one client, I'm losing 30, 40% of the revenue overnight. And that will scare buyers away. A lot of buyers won't even move forward. And the buyers that do move forward, now the seller is in a position where they have to do some kind of earn out or seller's owner's forgivable note, something that's going to secure against that. So that if that client gets lost for some reason in a certain time period, that the buyer is not going to have to pay the full amount for the business, which makes, that the terms worse. And, obviously we don't want a situation like that. Now, I'm not saying that if you've got a client that makes up 40% of your revenue, that you go out and you fire that client. Obviously, it's not a good move. But as you grow your business and if you're thinking about selling your business in 2 or 3 years, start to diversify your clients. And that's as you add on clients, make sure that you're growing and you're reducing that one client that's making up a huge revenue amount.
Yeah, that's really good advice, because it is common that, that one client is like this legacy client or customer, and they've been, serving them for so long to where they just keep getting more and more and more, let's say, properties or revenue from them. And they're like, well, we don't want to let them go. But then there needs to be that shift of focus of diversifying the revenue. So I totally agree. And I do want to touch on one of the other things that I know is valuable, but I want you to speak on the reoccurring revenue in a company, and what is that, and what does it bring to the table when it comes to increasing the value of a business?
Recurring revenue that's why a lot of buyers are very, very attracted to the green space to begin with, because a lot of the, whether it's maintenance or pesticide or fertilization, they have that reoccurring revenue, and it is very, very important. And a lot of buyers, that's what they're looking at is number one is, how much are you doing recurring revenue on a monthly basis or on an annual basis? What does that look like? And the follow-up question that right away when you answer that is, what's your retention rate of those clients? They're looking for high numbers like, 85, 90, 92% of your clients are being retained year in and year out. But that recurring revenue is everything. That's the one thing about this industry that attracts buyers, because then they're buying the business and they know that as long as they treat those clients the way that the seller was, that's recurring revenue coming in all the time, and they don't have to worry about every month bringing in a new client. You sell a widget, and that widget's out the door, and you may not sell again to that client for many, many years. That recurring revenue, that's everything. There's not much better things out there than reoccurring revenue, I think, other than royalties. So, not very many of us can make money off of royalties. But
well, these are some.
I wanted to go back real quick. We were talking about what were we talking? I'm so sorry, Christine. I just messed up. You might want to flag that, Christine.
It's okay.
Pause it. What
did you want to go back and talk about something?
Yeah, there was something.
Yeah, I just brought up
before the recurring revenue. High client concentration.
Yes.
I did want to add something about that. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
So, Christine, going back to the high client concentration, it's not just about when you sell your business and how that can impact the sale of the business, but the high client concentration, if you do have a client that's 40%, 50% of your revenue, that's putting yourself, your company, your employees, your family in danger. Because even if you're not thinking about selling your business and you lose that one client, a lot of your business is wiped out. So a lot of the things that we're talking about today are things that I talk to a seller about. It doesn't just apply when you go to sell your business. but it applies to it's just a better way of running a business that's going to protect you, your company, your employees, and your family.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's not just, I think, preparing to sell the company and looking at the possible strategies that, you have that's going to create those opportunities, but also what's going to contribute to the long-term health of the company and just its security. And I think that's important too. When we're running a business and maybe we're not ready to sell right now, but maybe it's 3 or 5 years down the road, is being aware of some of those gaps that can create, potential problems and setbacks as we continue to invest time in our business and grow it as an asset.
Yeah, even if you're planning on keeping the business for 20 years, it's just a lot of times it's just best practices and allow you to run your company, much better.
Yeah.
And even if you're not thinking about selling your business, this has happened so many times over my career where I'll be talking to somebody and they're like, never going to sell my business. I'm never going to sell my business. And then 6 months later, they're calling me up and they're like, Jim, I need to sell my business. I've got a health issue, or my wife got a job out of state that she just cannot turn down, or something happens. And you always want to have your company in a position where, it's your biggest, it's one of your biggest assets, if not your biggest asset, that you, at any time, if you did have to sell it, it's in the position to sell.
Yeah. So I want to move on to kind of the operations and organizational structure of a company. And this is something that I don't think is typically discussed when it comes to valuing a company. But it's one of those overlooked things where, like, we have the obvious things of, what's the revenue? Do we know our numbers? Is this company profitable? But then there's this flip side that I don't think a lot of business owners or entrepreneurs really consider. And it tends to be forgotten and kind of like, oh, why does that matter, until they're ready to sell. And then they start looking at it because they get educated on it. So can we talk around kind of some of those operational and organizational things that have to be in place? And one of them that I see is very common is the owner dependency in the company.
I knew you're going to say that, because that's the number one that I probably see too, is that the business is so dependent on the owner. And I think that owners, I love the small business owner mentality, because they tend to have a passion, and they really have a lot of confidence, and that's why they want to own their own business. And sometimes that though leads into, nobody can do this better than me. Nobody can do this better than me. Nobody can do this better than me. And so they're not delegating things out. And so the whole company ends up being dependent on them, which, again, even if you're not looking to sell, it traps the business owner where they cannot get away and take a vacation with their spouse, or take some time off in an emergency situation, or just have downtime, or take a step back so that they can grow their business. So learning to delegate is very important. But when you go to sell your business, if a buyer looks at that and goes, yeah, Joe, the owner, does everything. He knows everything, and there's not really anybody else that knows how to run that business or do certain parts in the organization. Buyers don't like that. Buyers love that when the owner says, well, Mary over here can handle this part of my job, and Bob over here could handle this, and Aaron can work this, and knowing that the job duties of the owner could be spread out instead of it all being dependent on the owner. That's very huge, Christine. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. So what it sounds like is more you're outlining and bringing to the table the key players of the business and what their job descriptions, roles, expectations, and outcomes are, and how they're doing the job in the company and contributing to it, versus everything being dependent on the owner, and the owner saying, hey, I have this job of being anything and everything in my company, and I want to sell it. So it's like they're trying to sell some job that has some revenue attached to it, versus a structure of proper delegation that's been built with identifying expectations and results.
And you take certain things in the green space. Let's take, a design company where the owner is doing all the designing of the landscaping and nobody else knows how to do that. That business, and if it's small enough, there may not be anything to actually sell at the end of the day in a situation like that. And so having those key employees you're talking about is important, where they can stand up and they can take some of that workload off. But it's funny because buyers like the fact that there are key employees in a business that, know the culture of the business, know the systems. And, once the seller gets done training the buyer during the transition period, that there is a key employee or a couple key employees that can continue working with the owner, and then they're bringing that culture forward, and they know how the systems work. But the double-edged sword is that the buyers then get like, well, is that key employer or those key employees are going to leave? Now the flip, they love it, but then they start thinking, well, gosh, now I'm worried about that key employee leaving. And so those are some strategies when there are key employees in place. There's strategies that we can put in place to ensure that the key employees will stay with the business post closing. And one of my favorite things to do is if you've got a key employee, and let's say the business is selling for, I don't know, $3 or $4 million, and you got a key employee making, $125,000, $150,000 a year, that you hold back from the sales price, $50,000 or $75,000 into an escrow account. And if the employee stays there for 18 months or 24 months, the employee gets that money. And if the employee's not there for any reason, and how I structure in a situation like that, I don't want the buyer or the seller to get that money. I mean, it's not my deal at the end of the day. The buyer and the seller have to agree to it. But having that money, if the employee's not there, that the money's donated to a charity that the buyer and the seller agreed to up front. That way, neither party has an influence of, I wouldn't want the buyer that the money goes to them, because then they could fire that employee 9 months in. And so you're kind of taking out of the hands of that kind of situation. And that might sound like a lot of money, of $50,000, $75,000. It really is. And you think about that employee that's making $100,000, $150,000 a year, and they can get a bonus like that in 18, 24 months. It's going to encourage them to stay. But, on the seller front, it sounds like a lot of money. But if you're selling your business for $3 or $4 million, and it's going to ensure that the transaction is going to get done, it's a good thing to have happen. And if you've got a key employee, you can look at it too that, it's kind of like a bonus for them as well. They help you build the business. They help you get to where you needed to be, so, hey, this is a little bit of money that you're going to get as well. So I think it's a great situation, a great scenario.
Yeah, I think it also can lessen the stress, and then, encourage a little bit more willingness on the key employee's part to be a part of this change and help weather the storm, and that there's something in it for them in ensuring, one, a good outcome, but two, going through something like that. Because in any business, when you have key employees and the business changes hands and there's this transition, there's a lot of work that's put on those key employees in the company, for one. So we're asking them to go above and beyond what they've already helped us build, right? And get to this point. But we're also asking them to take on this additional stress of a new management system coming in this transition phase. And that could mean new crews or a merger of a different company, where the company is being purchased and maybe it's being brought into a new company, or maybe they're bringing some of their team in. So there's all these variables, I think, that can impact the team, and setting something up like that guarantees, or at least contributes to guaranteeing the success, and also compensates for the extra, tasks, work, and stress that can come into play when you're doing some sort of buyout or buy-in in a company.
Because the owner's gone in a month or a couple months, and you're right, that key employee, has to step up, and it is a little bit. And that's a fantastic point. On the front of bonuses too, I this year I sold a pretty large business. The sellers got a lot more money than they ever dreamed they would have gotten from the sale of the business. And, I was talking to them about 2 weeks before closing, and they were so excited. They had like 50 or 60 employees, and they were like, Jim, we're thinking about giving a very substantial bonus to every single one of our employees, because we feel like we never thought we would get this kind of money, and we want to thank our employees. And they wanted to give their employees, each one of them, all 50, 60 of them, a very big check. And I said, I think that is so wonderful of you. They're great people. They were such great people to work with. They were genuinely good-hearted people. And I think it was wonderful that they thought like that. But I was like, the flip side of that, you have to worry about, these texts that are out there that, you got to remember, a lot of employees in lawn and landscape businesses, like when a business owner tries to set up a 401k plan or a health insurance plan, the employees don't want to take advantage of it. They're thinking about today and today only. And, you hand over on the day of closing a large check to employees like that. A lot of those employees may have said, you know what, I'm going to take the next 6 months off and I'm not going to work. They're not going to have that mentality of that's a big chunk of money and I'm going to put it away as an investment, or I'm going to put it away, for a rainy day. And I was like, the last thing you want to do to the buyer is give these big bonuses to the employees, and 20, 30 of them walk out within a week because they've got enough money to live off for the next 6 months. So it's a nice thought, but you have to think about it in practical terms as well. Key employees is different in the scenarios that we're talking about, and usually it's a delayed situation. And, those key employees usually are thinking a little bit different than, some other types. I don't know. Maybe that's bad for me to say. I'm just being real.
I hear where you're coming from, because, it's like we have different levels of employees in our company, and every one of them contributes a great outcome. So it's like they're part of the team. Without them, the company wouldn't be able to go around. But there is a different mindset, from someone who is managing, from the top level of the company versus someone who's out in the field. And it's just a different mindset. It's a different way of life, and not to say that those people out in the field aren't going to eventually be in that higher level of management, but it's a journey. It's kind of looking at, from our children, where they move from that teenage stage of life and how they're, looking at the day to day, to more of that, in their 20s and then in their 30s. There's a different life experience that's happening, and there's a different journey, but I look at it and I'm like, man, if I gave like my 20-something-year-old $75,000, right, they'd be like, I'm taking the year off and I'm going to Mexico. They wouldn't be looking at so much of the long term. So I totally understand what you're saying. And it's a great perspective to have of, yes, we can give, but let's give appropriately in a way that continues to motivate people, but also reward them, for the efforts that they've put in towards the journey.
Perfectly
so it could be a great disservice too.
Yeah, perfectly said. I couldn't have said any better, Christine.
So I think that's a good, perspective to have, is, to understand, who are we rewarding and how are they going to take it and what's their mindset. We don't want to do them a disservice. So I think that it's really great to take a pause and see, like, how are these people, on our team, how can we best serve them to be successful and not derail their journey of success so far.
Right.
So we've covered a lot of kind of, strategies of around the business and what needs to be prepared, and then also the owner and the key employees in the company and what that looks like. But there's this whole other side when it comes to a business, when it comes to the legalities. And is there anything that you could share with us on like legal or licensing issues, especially I think in this industry, because there are certain compliance that this industry has to abide by state to state, and that's different. So what are some of those that a business owner needs to be aware of when it comes to selling their business, the legalities or licensing in this industry?
So, that licensing issue, and I love that you're bringing up both the licensing and the legal. Let's touch on the licensing really quick. And the licensing, it depends on the size of the business. A business that has an enterprise value of 25 million or 50 million is going to be a different situation than an enterprise value of 3 or 4 million. If you take a business that has an enterprise value of 3 or 4 million, or smaller, which is still a good sized business, you're looking at a situation with licensing that a lot of times it could be an individual that's buying that business, and the person that's buying that business may not have the necessary licensing. So you take like a pesticide company, and that you need the special licensing depending on the state, what the license is called, but you need that licensing. And when you're selling, let me back up. When you're selling a business, you want to have the biggest pool of potential buyers that you can possibly have. To sit there and go, oh, I'm looking for that one ideal buyer, and you're looking, and it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. That's where you're not going to maximize your sales price. That's not where you're going to get the best terms. You open that buyer pool as big as you possibly can. That's where you're not only going to maximize your sales price, get the best terms possible, but you can find the right buyer for your business. And the right buyer for your business may not be somebody that's in the industry right now. If you're selling your business for a few $1 million. There's a lot of really good, smart people out there that are in their 40s and 50s that have had a really great career in the corporate world, have done really well for themselves. They have a decent net worth. They're making a good salary, but they're looking around and they're going, you know what? I have always dreamed of owning my own business, and I'm getting older and I've never pulled the trigger. And for a lot of them, they do not want to start a business from scratch, because as a business owner, you realize all the sweat equity and the years that it takes to build up the business. These are people in their 40s and 50s. They want to buy a business and get with an SBA loan. And a lot of times, even though they may not be in the industry right now, they are bringing a lot of great talents from the corporate world and a different perspective that they're going to do. They do very well in the business. Well, they may not have the license, so now we're running into a situation as how we're going to handle that licensing situation. And if it is a business, that an individual buying the business for a couple $1 million or less, you as the owner may be able to qualify for the business from a licensure standpoint. But if that buyer is typically going to be getting an SBA loan, and the SBA only allows the seller to carry that license for up to a year. And so what you want to do is, if you own a business that has particular licensing, try to have different scenarios going on where there's other people that will be able to qualify the business. It could be an employee that's currently working with you, that could maybe has been working with you for many, many years, knows it. They just need to do a little bit more studying in the books and go down and take the test. And now you have the option to the buyer, and you can say, hey, I can qualify for X period of time and X amount of dollars a month. Or, Bob, the employee, who's got his license, and you can pay him a little extra and he can qualify it. And this is all up until the buyer can get their licensure. Or is there somebody outside the organization or the company that they are friends with that'd be willing to license it as well? And buyers and lenders both like when there's multiple options when it comes to licensure, and it's not just one single scenario. And then the legal front, if you own the building, have you done a phase 1, phase 2, you got any problems with, environmental issues with your building, you have any lawsuits going on, either you're suing somebody or they're suing you, all that needs to be cleaned up. You got to make sure your tax returns are filed. You got to make sure all your licensing is up to date. The biggest thing is, I don't want a seller to be in a situation where they sell their business, they own it for 30 years, they've done a great job building the business, and they want to go travel the country with their wife in an RV and retire and enjoy life. And last thing I want them to do is to close on the business, get their money, get in the RV, go visit their grandkids and their kids all over the country in their RV, and then be looking over their shoulders because they're going to get sued because they didn't disclose something or they hid something from the buyer. When we're doing this transaction, this is not the time to hide anything. Anything that could potentially be a problem. If you're a seller and you're like, oh, if a buyer knew that, they wouldn't want to buy my business. That's what you need to talk to your business intermediary about and disclose those skeletons in the closet, those ugly things about your business, and disclose that. And your broker at that point should, guide you on how you can kind of handle that situation and what is the appropriate time to disclose that to a buyer. And if a buyer finds that out on their own, let's say you go under contract with that buyer and that buyer's going through their due diligence process and they find that out on their own, deal is going to fall apart. It's going to fall apart in a heartbeat. A buyer needs to like and trust the seller. And that immediately, if they find out something like that during due diligence, that trust is gone. And not to mention the legal issues that a seller might have post-closing. So they should disclose everything they possibly can to the broker.
And I would suspect, kind of trying to hide those legal issues, if they come back to bite you, there's going to be a bigger price tag associated with those than, what you got from your business. So I would think it's going to cost you more on the back end than it is going to be dealing with it and being upfront on the front end.
And not just monetarily, but stress. We want you to enjoy your retirement. We want to enjoy, and even if you're not retiring, you're selling for some other reason, enjoy your next stage in life without worrying about it,
Right. Yeah. Leave it all behind in a good way.
Right.
And walk away with the money. Yeah. All the way to the bank. So when is the best time for a lawn and landscape business to start looking at selling or even selling, or bringing it to the market? When is that timing and what does it look like?
Are you talking about a season during the year, or are you talking about like what time of the year?
Yeah. Is there like a time of the year that it's good to do, or a time? Because I know like a lot of lawn and landscape businesses can be seasonal. And there's a term that they use to where they call it the 100 days of hell, right? In the lawn and landscape industry, to where they're like, we launch in March and April and we're on fire for 100 days, right? And they are just running, and they're running hard, and they're running ragged. And it's not just the technicians, it's the entire company. And then, the cold comes in, and depending on the business model, it's crickets, right? So is there, depending on the type of business model and the seasonality of your business, is there a proper time for a company to look at selling, and how can that even impact, a purchase of a company?
Christine, I'm going to go back to my analogy with, my wife, my former wife. I always thought that if I waited till the perfect time, if we had waited the perfect time to have kids, we would have never had kids, because it's never going to be a perfect time. And, but there are better times and not so good times. And somebody has to be, knowledgeable of that, but it's never going to be a perfect scenario. So to me, I think the worst time to take the business to the market is between the Thanksgiving and the New Year's. You might be taking to the market. There's buyers out there all year round, but that's when there's the least amount of buyers on the market. So when you take the business to the market in that type of situation, that pie that I was telling you about earlier, where you want the biggest amount of buyers looking at your business, it's not that big at that time period. So you definitely don't want to do it during that time period. I don't take businesses to market and Thanksgiving to the New Year. Now that's where it starts to flip into the other problem is that it is going to require some time of the seller. Now obviously your business intermediary, whether it's me or whether it's somebody else, their job is to reduce the time that you are spending on the sale and make it less stressful for you. But still, you need to be involved, and you're going to have to be active in that sales process. I mean, buyers are going to want to have conversations with you. There's going to be questions that are going to come up. There's going to be some information that's going to need to be gathered before we go under contract. And then once we go under contract, we get in the due diligence or period or that quality of earnings situation, you're going to have to be involved with that type of a scenario. So if you are going through the due diligence during your busiest time, that could be very, very difficult for you. I think it's always nice when you have somebody that is going to assist you in those scenarios, whether it's a spouse, whether it's your CPA or a trusted employee. Remember when we sell businesses, we don't want anybody to know the business is for sale. Customers, employees, competitors, anybody. But, I have done sales where there was a trusted employee that knew the business was for sale and they were key in getting that sale done. But if you look at the whole calendar year and you take out Thanksgiving to Christmas and you start looking at that and go, there's not really going to ever be that perfect time. That's why I was talking about that scenario where, if you waited for the perfect time to have a child, for a lot of us, we would have never had kids, because in your 20s and early 30s, it's usually the most hectic point in your time, in your life. You're not well off financially, but it's really good to have somebody that can help you and assist you through that period. I think right now, January, February, if you can get a business to the market in January, February, I think that's a fantastic time. It might start to trail into the busiest time. That's okay. Or as you get later into like March and April, because if you can go into that March and April and get everything set up, hopefully you're hitting the tail end of your busy season as you're getting into the actual due diligence process, because it's going to take a couple months to get the business under contract. And it's not just about the seller, but you got to think about the buyer. I mean, do you really want the buyer to close on a business, in middle of April, right before the busiest season? That may be the most hectic time for the buyer as well, so.
Yeah, you might scare them away.
And I don't want to scare sellers away either. I don't want to set somebody or a business owner and they're listening to this like, oh my gosh, Jim's talking about the due diligence and Jim's talking about this and the time. You know what? We do this day in and day out. I mean, this is what we do. This is what I've been doing for 25 years. We're going to take that pressure off you. And it's not just me, whether you're using me or another qualified broker to help you sell your business, your broker's there to help you to reduce that stress and take that time off your shoulders and is going to guide you through the whole process. It's not from a seller standpoint. Yes, you have to be involved. There's things you need to do, but don't freak out. We'll take it one step at a time and we'll walk you through the process. You'll be fine.
Yeah. And there's a team involved, right? Like there's a broker, there's usually, a CPA or accountant, there could be a business advisor. So it's great to have a number of people sitting at the table to support you. We've gone through it with our clients to where they're like, okay, I'm ready to sell my business. We start helping them with that. And when they are prepared because they've been working with us for years. But we sit at the table and we help them and answer the questions with the people that are coming and saying, hey, tell me about the business. What about the financials? And we're like, yeah, let's walk you through that. Let's, and if we're coaching them and stuff, let's walk you through the operations. Here's some assessments that we've done over the years. These are the things we've improved. And it just really changes the whole tone and brings so much confidence to the company that's, not just qualifying the business, but that is buying the company as well. And they're seeing like, this is something that's been taken care of. It's almost like buying a car and having the full maintenance history on the car. And it's got, a great mileage and it's been well cared for. And you can just see the history and how that happened.
Yeah. And Christine, I don't want listeners to think that I'm trying to sell your services. When I say this, I genuinely mean it. You and your team would you guys take so much off, like me and my team take so much off of a seller, but you and your team are doing that as well because you have access to the seller's financials. You're putting their financials together. So all that is off their shoulders. And that allows me and my team to reach out to you and your team and just CC the seller in on the email and say, hey, we need this. And the buyer's asking for this, or the bank needs this, or da-da-da-da. And you guys are digging up that information. And the seller knows what's going on. They're CC'd in on the emails. They know what's going on. And we're having conversations. They know what's going on, but they're not sitting there like, calling, trying to drag and figure it out. I mean, let's face it, most small business owners are very visionary people. They think about the big picture. They got the dreams, they got the goals, they know what they want to do. That's why they're successful as business owners. But on the flip side of that, a lot of times business owners are not, the visionary type people are not good at the granular, detailed type stuff. And that's where you and your team do a phenomenal job.
Yeah. We like to spoil the people that we work with. And then in turn, the people that they work with get spoiled because a lot of the work is done, by the time we start having these conversations, and we just want to make it easy and less stressful. So it's all a part of the journey. So I want to talk about, before we move on to, what you do and how you work with customers, the businesses you work with. One of the things that I always find fascinating is setting, the price of a business. Like there's the perceived emotional value that owner will put a dollar amount on, and then there's the real number. So I want to kind of, if you could talk to our audience about that to help them kind of understand what does a realistic asking price look like, and how do they get there?
Core Growth Strategies provides business growth management solutions through cloud accounting, bookkeeping, and strategic business consulting programs. Our team works with small businesses in lawn care and landscape and trade industries throughout the U.S. We increase our clients' business acumen by creating business performance transparency through financials and strategic advisement based on industry best practices and benchmarks. Our experienced team provides support, guidance, and coaching, thereby allowing our clients to connect with viable data and discover their own solutions. Core Growth Strategies programs and services are designed to get your business from where it is now to where you have always dreamed it to be. Visit us today at coregrowthstrategies.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Don't miss our exclusive limited time podcast special. Just mention promo code GPA Pro to any member of our team during your complimentary consultation, or enter the promo code on our site when you sign up for one of our online programs. That's promo code GPA Pro.
I think that's a great question, Christine, because one of the most important things is that the business owner goes to the market with the right price. I mean, obviously, if they go to the market too low, they're leaving money on the table. We all know that. But unfortunately, a lot of times, business owners will go to the market. They think their business is worth more than it really is. They go to the market with too high of an asking price. And then what ends up happening is that you end up getting less for your money at the end of the day. Because, you're putting your business on the market, buyers are looking at it. Usually buyers have been looking for a couple months to a couple years if it's an individual buyer. And then you got your professional buyers, your corporate buyers and private equity groups, things like that. And they're consistently and constantly looking. And regardless of who the buyer is, buyers know when businesses are overpriced. So when a business hits the market and it's overpriced grossly, they move on. They're like, it's just another overpriced business, and they move on. And so, obviously overpriced, and what ends up happening down the road is that you keep dropping the price. Very rarely do those buyers come back in droves to look at that business, because they look at it and go, it's already been on the market. I looked at that, and they moved on. And then you end up, 6 months, 8 months later, you finally get one buyer, and you're trying to negotiate with that one buyer. And you've already dropped the price a bunch of times, and now you have no leverage, and you're going to end up taking less than you would have if you went to the business with the correct price to begin with. And I know I'm rambling on, Christine, but this is a passion of mine about pricing it properly. A lot of times, business owners, when I talk to them, they'll say, I already know what my business is worth, and I'll say why, and they'll say, my CPA told me. And usually, a CPA, and I think it would be different for you and your group because you guys specialize in this space, but usually CPAs, they might be great at filing tax returns and giving financial advice as far as your business goes. But when they don't sell businesses, this is not what they're doing day in and day out. I really think there's only two types of people that should give you a valuation on your business. Either a business broker that's out there and knows the marketplace, is selling businesses all the time and has access to the information, or a business appraiser that has the certifications to be an actual business appraiser. Those are the only two. And then obviously from there, you've got good brokers, bad brokers, great brokers, inexperienced appraisers, very experienced appraisers. So you just got to make sure that you get somebody that's very seasoned, experienced, knows what they're doing, whether it's an appraiser or a business broker. But those are the only two people that should be giving you a value on your business. So that's the only way you're going to get the correct valuation.
Yeah. And I love that you're stating, like work with a professional that's going to give you a valuation, because I feel like in all the years I've been working, with businesses and all different, shapes and sizes and of businesses, I will sit down with the business owner, and at some point we'll have the conversation of, like, what does the exit plan look like for you? Or, where do you want to be in 5 or 10 years? And somewhere in that conversation, it comes up of, I want to sell the business, whether that's to a family member or just out on the market. So when we start diving into that, conversation, when it's like, well, what's your business worth? There's this emotional value that the business owner has tied to this entity, to this business. And the emotional value, when they compute it into dollars, is far beyond what it would be, computed in with a professional looking at the business and saying, okay, this is how we're going to value the business. And these are all the ingredients we need to consider to get to this dollar that you're thinking of. So I feel like there's a huge gap when business owners, they start thinking about this of emotionally what they think their business is worth. So there's, this emotional tie, and they say, oh, here's the dollar amount. And then realistically what it's worth. And the gap can be so big, it could be disappointing to where they kind of like, they're like, well, I don't believe it. Or how are we going to fix this? Or, so there's some sort of course, the bigger the expectation, right? The bigger the disappointment. So then we've got to work through that with them of explaining to them, if you want to sell your business, these are the things that you have to fix.
You are 1000% correct. That emotional attachment, and, real estate agents, they often talk about, people that want to sell their house, the sellers think their house is worth more than it really is. But I think when selling a house, it's like, the house is worth 700 and the seller thinks the house is worth 730,000. Usually when somebody's, wanting to sell their business, the business might be worth $1 million, but they think it's worth $3.5 million or $4 million. Like the range is usually, a lot higher. And, I do hear from time to time too, it's not how much they really think the business is worth. It's, oh, I need X amount of dollars. I want to retire and I need X amount of money. And it's not what you need, it's what you're going to get. But that's why you said that in the beginning, is you were talking about them approaching you or myself early. And that's the important thing, is that if a business owner knows that they want to sell in 2 years, 5 years, whenever it is, that they're approaching, myself, for what I do, and approaching you for what you do, so that one, they understand how much they're really going to get for that business. And if they need more money than that, they have a goal to reach to. And that's where you come in and help them grow their business and get to the point where they can get to the business to the level that where they can, get the value of the business on that. And also, they can help them with their financial planning at the end of the day, so that they're not 65 going, I want to sell this year. And then they find out, I'm just not going to get as much for my business as I thought I was.
Yeah. I love having the conversation with them. One, we got to find out, like, what is your business worth now? And then how do we increase the multiplier? So coming up with, strategic solutions that can increase that multiplier, and doing it across, just many different areas, because there's so many opportunities, right? Like we can increase the multiplier depending on the market and say, well, what can we do in the market to increase that multiplier? We can look at the operational structure and, the amount of, supporting operational procedures, right, that are in the company, and look at the key players and, various other things that we can do to figure out, well, how can we increase this multiplier so that way we can get there faster? And I think that is a benefit of working with not just like one person on your team when you're, really trying to strategically plan for an exit or to get your top dollar, but a team of people, right? That is an expert in the industry.
Right.
And I would love for you to share with our listeners when we're looking at a team of experts, like who are the type of experts that a business owner and entrepreneur should work with when they're thinking about preparing and then getting to the point of selling their company?
I think if someone's really looking to sell their business, in the next couple of years, and I'm not just saying this because I'm on your podcast, but I think they need to reach out to somebody like you, so that they can start, growing their business as much as they can and, reduce their expenses. You consult with them, clean up the business, do the things that you just mentioned. I don't want to repeat everything you just said because everything you said was fantastic. And then also reaching out to somebody like myself, whether it's me or somebody else that does what I do, make sure you get somebody that specializes in the green space. And, and that way that, because for me, like when I'm talking to a business owner and they say, I'm looking to sell in 2 or 3 years, I can do a broker's opinion of value for them, tell them how much the business is worth today. So they get an idea and then they can kind of work from there what they need. And then, but I'm also doing what's called a buyer assessment call where I'm asking them a series of questions that I know buyers are going to ask. And I'm looking for the holes in their current situation that they can potentially fix, over the next couple of years while they're preparing that business for sale. And from there, I tell buyers, and I don't charge anything for the assessment call. I don't charge anything for the broker's opinion of value. And there's no obligation to use my services when they are ready to sell. But I look at it as it's a good way to build goodwill and build a relationship with a business owner. And I do hope that they come back and use me or they recommend somebody else to myself. That's why I do it. But, if they're looking to sell a couple years out, then every year, come March, when they get their business tax returns done and their financials complete, we can just update that broker's opinion of value every year until they're ready to sell. So there's no guessing. They always got in the back of their mind how much they're going to be able to, sell their business for. So other professionals besides you and I, one of the big things that they're going to probably need is an attorney. And, I know that when business owners hit a certain level, they usually have an attorney that they've worked with before that is, a good attorney, somebody that they feel comfortable with. And that's great. The one thing is that when we start doing M&A, mergers and acquisitions, your typical business attorney that does not specialize in business transactions or M&A is probably not the best attorney to use in this case. They might be a great attorney. They might have helped you out for years and years and years, and you have a good relationship with them. But I've seen too many instances where a business owner is like, "Oh, I'm going to use my attorney, my general business attorney," and it's just not. It's not a good situation at all. And I don't know if you want to. We can go more in depth with about that. And their CPA, and if they're using your services, because you guys offer both the consulting and the CPA services, but the CPA being on board is extremely important as well. And then, I don't think they should be talking to all their family and friends because you do want to keep the sale of the business confidential, but your significant other, you got to make sure that obviously they're on board and you're having those conversations with them because there is kind of like there's a lot going on. It's a very emotional, standpoint. And there's usually a lot of things that a business owner has to work through. It's their baby. And now they're letting their baby grow up and, move out.
Right.
So.
And I love that you touched on the point of don't talk to everybody, right? Because it's funny how all of a sudden everybody is an expert in what you're trying to do. And, nobody else in your family may have owned a business, or maybe they owned a business and they had their own experience. But that experience is not going to be the same experience that you would be having if you sold a business. So I think that is a really good piece of advice because getting feedback from people who aren't the experts can really cloud, the person who's selling the company, their opinion, the emotions they might be going through. There's so much. And I know that there's also this importance of confidentiality when you are bringing a company, to the market and, people talk. And even though you might feel it's a tight-knit circle, they might mention it to someone who mentions it to someone else who mentions it to someone else. And I'd be curious, what would that be jeopardizing with, putting that out there that like, oh, I'm selling my business and now everybody knows?
And that's the critical thing. And I think I'm glad you added the thing about, talking to people, because everybody is the expert, but then they're probably giving you the wrong advice because they're not the expert. And I was alluding to the confidentiality, and I'm glad you asked that question, because keeping the sale of the business is confidential is extremely important. And most of the business owners that I talk to, right away, they understand that. Right away, when I'm talking to them, they're like, is this going to be confidential? And that's actually one of the first things that comes out of my mouth when we're talking is everything we talk about is going to be confidential, because you got to look at it from an employee standpoint. An employee finds out the business is for sale. They either have a mortgage or rent. They got car payments. They got food on the table. They might have a wife or a husband. They got kids. They depend on their job to support their living. And if they find out the business is for sale, the first thing that's going to run through their head is, am I going to have a job? Is the new owner going to come in and keep me on staff? Now, 99.9% of the time, as long as the person, is doing their job, the new owner is going to keep them. But that does scare, employees where they're like, I don't know if they're going to keep me, and they might look for a job. So as a business owner, you might be hurting your workforce by telling them that the business is for sale. And another thing is that, obviously customers, you're in the middle of let's take a, landscape, project, and, somebody's, lay down $25,000, $30,000 to do landscaping with you. Are they going to be like, maybe I'm going to use a different company. I know that this company's for sale. Will they be around, next week to finish up the project? And so you have to worry about it from a customer standpoint, and suppliers and vendors. They might look at it and go, hey, I know your business is up for sale. I can't offer you 30-day terms anymore. I'm going to need cash on delivery. I'm not going to know if you're around. And then competitors can use that against you and win jobs from you. Oh, you don't want to sign that contract with them. It's business is up for sale. So you want to keep the business should be kept strictly confidential.
Yeah.
People should find out when you as a business owner get your check. Well, you don't get checks anymore, but you get the wire that hits your account.
Right. Yeah, those are really good points. And I think that they're points that not all of us might think about in the moment, because it could be a very exciting time. You might want to share it with someone, but those are all really good points to consider to make sure, you're continuing to safeguard that asset until that asset is turned over and the deal is done.
Christine, I wanted to add one more thing, because you had mentioned something about, we were talking about talking to family and friends. That's one of the biggest things that me and my team do is protect the confidentiality of the sale. That's one of the biggest things we do. And right out of the gate, one of the first things we have a buyer do is sign a confidentiality agreement before we disclose any information at all. And then we have a series of steps that we go through to help, keep the sale to business confidential. But the only breach of confidentiality that I've seen in my practice in the last, I don't know, gosh, it's been forever, 10 or 15 years, was that the business owner was at a wedding. And it was actually under contract at the time with a buyer. And the owner of the business was at a wedding, and he ran into his cousin that I guess he didn't talk to very often. And they were having a couple drinks, and he goes, yeah, my business is under contract. I'm selling it. And about a month later, because it took us 90 days to close that deal. About a month later, the cousin called the business and said, hey, I don't know if I'm so-and-so. I don't know if my cousin sold the business yet or not, but I need some work done. And the employee was like, what? And so a key employee had answered the phone and took that call. So there was a lot of, we had, the business owner had to deal with a lot. So you never know, you tell somebody that you trust, you got to think about it. It's like high school. You tell somebody that you trust something, but then they know somebody that trusts somebody, and that person knows somebody that trusts somebody. And sometimes people just aren't thinking either, like in this case.
Yeah. It's good intentions can, create bad outcomes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So could you share some advice if someone's looking at, wanting to put their business on the market in the next couple of years, or thinking about, hey, I need to prepare, or maybe I don't know what I don't know. Like, what kind of advice would you give someone who's starting to think about, selling their company?
I'll tell you what, the number one piece of advice that I'll give that I see the most often, there's different things that we go over in that assessment call, but the number one thing, and, if you're sitting there and you're thinking about selling in the next couple of years, you may not like what I'm about to say.
but, I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. I'm here to tell you what you need to do, and how to protect yourself. So the number one thing I see is that business owners will, and look, before I say what I'm going to say, I want you to understand that I have been doing this for nearly 25 years. I've seen everything and anything you can imagine. I'm not here to judge anybody at all. I'm here to have conversations and talk to people and guide them, etc. So I'm not judging, but a lot of business owners run personal expenses through the business because they're trying to save their taxes, obviously, save on taxes. And, the problem is when you go to sell your business, lenders, if a buyer is looking to get a lender of some sort, lenders are very strict on what they're going to accept or not accept. Buyers have different tolerances, but today's buyer is completely different than the buyer they were 25 years ago when I first got in this industry. Buyers want to track everything through tax returns, bank statements, merchant service statements, P&Ls, balance sheets, all the different financial information, cross-reference things. And they're usually going to get done what's called a quality of earnings done if it's a big enough business. And, all those numbers need to add up. And I'm going to tell you the one thing that buyers are not going to do. Buyers are not going to go through a general ledger, adding back, this $50 purchase here and that $75 purchase there. Running personal expenses through the business is the number one reason why either business owners cannot sell. One of the reasons why business owners cannot sell, or they can't maximize their sales price or get the best terms possible. You want to keep your books clean as you possibly can. Bite the bullet, pay your taxes. You should be doing it anyways. Again, I'm not judging, but you should be doing it anyways. But even if you're in the highest tax bracket, and for every dollar that you are not reporting or every dollar that you're running a personal expense through, you're saving 37 cents in today's highest income tax bracket, 37 cents on that dollar. When you go to sell your business, that same dollar that you're saving 37 cents on, you might be losing out on $3, $4, $5, $6, $8. I don't know what the multiplier is because multipliers depend on the sub industry, and it also depends on the size of the business. My point is you're saving pennies and you're losing out on dollars.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I refer to it as using your business as an ATM machine. And I see it all the time to where they're running all this personal expense through. And, so we crack down on that and we make sure, some owners have gotten their hands slapped over the years where we're like, what is this? And, they come up with some story and then we're like, well, no, okay, let's talk about this some more. So, we don't pull any punches when it comes to working with our clients and making sure like their books are clean, their books are legit. And if there is a personal expense, it goes through the owner's, draw or, an owner's account. So that way it can show if they go to sell their company, the owner received this much from the business as a compensation, or as a benefit and bonus. And that can be transferable over to the new owner in that amount because it shows that the company was capable of supporting the owner. And it's not just a job, it's a business. And they're either getting, profit distribution from it, or they're working, a part-time role in the company and they're getting a nice salary for it. There's something that shows that they got a decent compensation. So we always make sure that we tie everything back to, what benefited the owner specifically in the business.
Yeah. And, I want to dig a little deeper in that too, because you're absolutely right. But the one thing too, that the seller needs to keep in mind, because I know a lot of times a business owner will go out, use their, credit card or debit card, and they're running personal expenses on that card, and they're using it all the time. Boom, 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 boom. And then it comes to you or somebody like you that's doing the books, and that person makes the adjustments and makes it a distribution instead of a business expense. So you're cleaning up on the books. But the problem is that when you go into due diligence with a buyer, and the buyer's going to be asking you for your tax returns, your financials, your bank statements, your merchant service statements, and you hand over your bank statements, they might understand that, all these $30 purchases and $40 purchases at McDonald's or wherever it is a personal expense. they don't want to go through your bank statements and just see tons and tons. It makes their lives harder doing the due diligence. You kind of want to be in a point when it comes to due diligence that you go under contract, the buyer does their due diligence, and it's like it flies through due diligence. It just flies. There's not a lot of going back and forth, asking questions, concerns, things like that. Let it fly through due diligence. So I would say stop using your business card for any personal expenses. Period.
Yeah. And that's something where we draw the line and we ask questions, because we also see a lot of entrepreneurs where they will use their personal cards in the business for combination of business and personal expenses. So, we really try to create that segregation and make sure, hey, your personal is your personal, your business is your business. And, let's separate this.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how much more all the companies we've done that with, how much more profit they've been able to track over, the last several years, and how much profit and cash stays in the business. And they've even increased their pay. So they're really getting their financials dialed in to see how profitable their business is, and just able to really tighten up that ship. So they know they're ready when they're going to sell the company, that they're going to get top dollar for it, because they've done all this work just keeping the financials clean. It's just like such a huge difference.
Christine, too, like, okay, so they do that, $30,000 landscape project, and the homeowner, like, I'll pay you in cash, and, will you give me a discount? And then that cash doesn't get reported. So the cash is not getting reported. They're running personal expenses through the business. Even if you're not looking to sell your business, it becomes very hard to then look at your financials and interpret the financials of how you're really performing in the business. I mean, all the things that me and you are talking about today, and things that I talk about on an assessment call, like client concentration and the owner's role in the business, all this type of stuff, whether you're selling your business or you're keeping your business, it's going to make you're going to probably make more money at the end of the day, because you can use the financial information for that instance. For example, you can analyze it better and you can make better decisions. And all the other things that we talk about is going to make your business a better business, and it's going to make you as a business owner less stressful. So whether you're selling or not selling, it's just a good way to run a business.
Yeah, I agree. And so I just kind of want to recap some of the things. If somebody's getting ready to sell their company or they're thinking about it, what I have heard you say so far in this episode is, one, know the value of your business. Right? Yeah. Let's work on closing that gap. Where do we start? We start with identifying the value. And then two is, don't run personal expenses through the business. Let the business stand on its own and be its own entity. Don't use it as an ATM machine.
Those are probably the two big ones. And you know what, Christine, if you ever let me come back, I would love to go over and touch on some other things that would help your viewers prepare their business for sale too. But those are probably the two biggest ones.
Excellent. Yes. Well, I hope you will be joining us again in the future. I know that we have talked about, I think it's next month, we have a webinar with you where we're going to be talking about, I believe, selling your company. So if you're listening to this, we will share some of that information. Keep an eye out for it. I'll share those in the show notes. And I'll also be sharing the information on how to get a hold of you. Is there anything, if someone reaches out to you, Jim, where do they start if they want to start working with you? What does that look like?
Oh, as far as how to contact me, or?
Yeah, I'll share your contact information in our show notes. But, someone's looking at, I want to have a conversation with Jim, and I want to talk to him about what it would look like to sell my company. What does that process look like, just so they know what to expect?
Oh, yeah. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a conversation. Our first conversation, again, it's confidential. I'm not going to tell anybody that, anything about your business. But we're just going to have a conversation. I'm going to just talk to you about, your business and the background, what you're trying to, accomplish, what your goals are. Try to understand everything about your business. And from there, we'll do a broker's opinion of value for you. And there's no charge for you. There's no obligation to use our services. We'd be asking you for your financial information. And, we understand that, Christine or your CPA are trying to reduce your tax liability and you're trying to reduce your tax liability. We're going to unwind all that. And we're talking right now about things like deep depreciation and amortization and some other things like that. And we're going to come up with that broker's opinion of value. And from there, if you wanted to move forward, we would enter into a listing agreement. My listing agreements are only for 6 months. I don't charge anything up front. 6 months might sound like a long time, but the average is about a year. Most brokers do it for a year. We do a 6-month listing agreement with no money out of your pocket at all. Any expenses that come up, with our writer, graphic designer, marketing and advertising, those are all costs that come out of my pocket. That's how confident me and my team are that we're going to get your business sold.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate your time. We went over so much valuable information for anyone who's looking at whether it's now or in the future, being prepared to sell their business and get the most value out of their asset. So I want to thank you to our listeners for tuning in today. And if you have not subscribed to our podcast yet, please do. And we will see you on our next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Green Profit Academy Pros Podcast,
the show that digs into the challenges of growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit.